Today we'll be talking about augmentative and alternative communication devices. What is augmentative and alternative communication, otherwise known as AAC? It includes all forms of communication other than oral speech that are used to express thoughts, needs, wants, and ideas. We all use AAC to a certain extent. An example of this would be using facial expressions when we communicate with others. Augmentative is used to support or supplement existing speech, while alternative is in replacement of speech due to absence or malfunction.
Some facts about complex communication disorders, otherwise known as CCN. There are an increasing number of children with CCN. Some factors that go into this are neurological disorders like cerebral palsy, traumatic brain injury, and autism. Physical structures like cleft palate, genetic disorders like Down syndrome, and developmental disabilities. Almost 17.9 million people have trouble using their voice. 6 to 8 million people have some form of language impairment, and approximately 4 million Americans are unable to meet communication needs using their natural speech. Now that we know more about AAC, let's get into a brief history of it. Sign language is the oldest AAC system, and Morse code is the second oldest, being made in the 19th century. The first known AAC device was developed in 1920 and was co-developed by F. Hall Rowe, who had cerebral palsy. It was the F. Hall Rowe communication board as pictured here. You can see a bunch of different letters and words that one can use to communicate effectively through this board. The first electric AAC machine was made in the 1960s called the Patient Selector Operated Machine. Otherwise known as sip and puff. You can see here that you can inhale and exhale through a tube and the signals are sent to a typewriter. The only thing about this is it was only used at home, only for home use, so you couldn't bring it out and about.
Some types of AAC. The first type would be unaided systems. This is where you use your own body to communicate through gestures, signals, body language, and facial expressions. One of these would be the manual sign system. They can be highly developed systems of communication. An example of this would be ASL. It has its own vocabulary and syntax, which is the way the words are arranged and how they affect each other. It's basically its own language. One problem with unaided systems for people who need to heavily rely on them to communicate would be lack of motor skills for signing and not having much of society be able to comprehend what they are saying, since not many people know sign language, and this would be very hard for everyday conversations. The other type of system is the aided systems, where you use some sort of device or equipment to aid or replace communication. They can vary in the complexity, so the amount of technology involved. They range from no-tech, which would be like a word board, to high-tech systems using computer software and usually some sort of speech-generating device. They can vary in the transparency of symbols, and also the selection. They can either be direct or indirect. The direct ones use some sort of physical touch or generated activation through a joystick or eye gaze. The indirect, also known as scanning, is where they present items in an order until the desired image is selected using an agreed upon movement, vocalization, or a switch. This is very beneficial for people with visual or auditory deficits. How is the system set up? It uses symbols that represent language, known as language representation methods, or LRMs. An individual may use a combination of them or just a single one. This depends on the device and the individual's preference. The first one would be alphabet-based methods, which is the top right picture. This is based on traditional spelling and often uses word and phrase predictions to help with efficiency. The second one would be single meaning messages, the bottom right picture. This uses pictures to either represent a word or a phrase. And then the final one would be semantic compaction. This requires training. It combines pictures to mean different things because oftentimes one picture can mean many different things. So they use multiple pictures to try to get a more accurate message across.
How much do AAC devices cost? Sotillo, which is a lead company in the AAC industry, provides communication devices that can vary from around $3,000 to $7,500. Many of these devices have upgrades you can also purchase along with them to fit the needs that are necessary for you to communicate with the world around you. On the left side, we have the NovaChat 5, which is closer to the $3,000 price range. And on the right side, we have the Ascent 1400, which is closer to the $7,500 range.
One thing that can be very beneficial in our day and age are AAC apps. Touch Chat is very popular, and it is a symbol-based app that is available on Apple products. It is customizable, so you can add your own photos. Vocabulary programs are pre-programmed, but you can also customize them. It is created by Satillo, which is very reliable, and the app itself is $150 to $300. The boards can be simple or more sophisticated, and one really nice thing about it is that it can predict words to cut down in navigation time. You can also change pages through gestures, which can be frustrating for some people, or some people find it frustrating because they can accidentally do the gesture and the page will change.
The benefits and challenges of AAC. Challenges to assessment and decision making. There is a lack of professional interest in family involvement, which means that families have little to no input on which device their child gets from the professionals. This is bad considering most families know their child very well and know what they need to communicate with the world around them. Struggling to obtain services means that families are oftentimes never informed that AAC is an option for them. Struggling with funding is also very hard because these devices are so expensive. Terminology is crucial when requesting funding. If mentioned that it was for school, insurance would expect the school to pay. A word that is important to include when writing up for insurance would be for the individual's safety so that you are able to find the appropriate funding. Supports to assessment and decision making. Obtaining a recommendation from a professional helps enhance the acceptance of the device within the school system. Many schools will often not help the child use it if it does not have a professional recommendation along with it. Families should also take a leadership role in the process of assessment and decision making because they know their child well and understand the needs that they have. Knowledge and skills needed to use AAC technology. Operation competence involves technical operation and upkeep, strategies for programming and technology breakdown solutions. Technical issues are often a challenge when no family members are around because oftentimes people do not understand how to use the AAC device or how to reset it if there is a breakdown. Many learn how to use these devices from manuals, telephone support, and training courses. Some families find these to be helpful options while others find them lacking information. Parents also experienced with computers beforehand found that understanding how to use the device was much easier. Linguistic competence. Challenging to select appropriate vocab and skills needed to create sentences with that vocab. Users must learn word placement on the device and with where the phrases are in order to communicate smoothly with the world around them. Social competence involves gaining attention, which users often report raising the volume or repeating words or phrases that they have previously said. Question asking skills are important to work on because it helps them to be more social with partners and have more normal interactions. Barriers to learning AAC. There is a lack of trained professionals within schools, and there is a lack of interest in schools for wanting to learn more about AACs. SLPs often lack the knowledge and experience to help students learn AAC or other users. Challenges supporting ongoing use of the device. To develop competency, you should have a constant and consistent access to a device in order to practice and become better at using it. Technical breakdowns lead to frustration, interrupted learning, and sometimes temporary abandonment of the device by clients.
So the loneliness experiences with AAC. There was a study done on young adults ages 24 to 30 who use AAC and have cerebral palsy. They focused on their experiences with loneliness when becoming adults. They discussed three main themes that were concluded to be the biggest factors when understanding the experiences of loneliness: the support systems, the AAC system use, and technology. So the first one, support systems. They recognize that having a mix of family and friends for support is very important. Even if they do have people around, if they don't necessarily have the skills to be able to communicate with them, this can lead to increased loneliness. There are very few programs out there designed to help people with and without AAC to communicate. Adults with cerebral palsy that use AAC tend to continue to rely on their family for support as they age. Their parents often don't outlive the children, so finding that continued support is very important. Finally, using a device to communicate can lead to misunderstandings that can hinder relationships due to misunderstandings. The second one is AAC system use. All the participants strongly agreed that AAC devices have increased their independence, the number, and the quality of their friendships. Even with the correct use of AAC, other communicative technologies are advised to assist with healthy relationships such as smartphone and the internet. Leading into this would be technology. Most of the young adults discussed the importance of using the internet and messaging to maintain friendships and keep in contact with family, especially in this day and age. There were mixed reviews about the accessibility of the technology, and they were not all aware that there were tools out there to help with this. Looking forward in a little overview. Although most people feel lonely from time to time, this study pinpointed communication leading to some of these issues. Individuals often rely on others to help communicating, so increasing self-advocacy will help with a transition into adulthood and having more autonomy instead of having their parent always speak for them. Increasing the awareness for the general public could also be useful in terms of increasing social interactions with people who use AAC, therefore decreasing their loneliness. And finally, increasing the awareness and the accessibility for individuals who use AAC can greatly benefit their communication.
One last AAC story is from Jim Prentice. He relied on AAC for years. Augmentative and alternative communication can provide a person with the ability to have and develop strong and rewarding relationships with others. Deny a person the ability to articulate intelligibility, and that person is sentenced to live in social, intellectual, and emotional isolation. And here are our references.